Welcome back. It's the 17th of November 2025, and in response to the latest capital gains tax comments about investing in the productive economy and getting out of residential rental investment properties, I will now present an alternative to investing in residential rental properties that should hopefully have bipartisan support. So I will send this now to the leader of every political party in New Zealand and the media who are currently covering the capital gains tax, who have never asked the question, well, if you don't want to invest in residential rentals, what's the alternative? And that should be the question every time. Oh, don't invest in residential rentals? What else are we going to invest in? So I'll give you an alternative. Here we go. So this is the purpose of this is to create a freehold electricity generation titles, which I've called EGTs, for the purpose of private energy generation on New Zealand farms. So the maximum height, circa 60 metres, allows for up to a 1 megawatt wind turbine, enough to power 550 homes or locally generate hydrogen. This is the height here. It's a bus, so we're pretty big, but will be set back from the road. So using existing farm access tracks and power poles or three-phase lines to backfeed the electricity network. Obviously on the size of the plot, you could put any size wind turbine you want. A minimum farm size of say 50 hectares and minimum distance of 2 kilometres from another dwelling. These are all subject to discussion, obviously. Purpose of this proposal is to create a policy to allow for the creation of freehold electricity generation titles on existing large farms throughout New Zealand. The creation of EGTs would allow for investors, including mum and dad investors, to purchase freehold titles and install wind and or solar generation to create passive income streams. These titles and associated infrastructure could be mortgaged, creating a competing investment to residential rental property investment. The income from the sale of EGTs could be used by farmers to create another electricity generating asset, wind or solar, that stays with the farm, allowing the farm to become self-sufficient for electricity while still being connected to the grid and provide passive income for the farm. The main policy and legislative requirements from central government would be a Resource Management Act, even that's now being absolved, but national policy statement making the land use and subdivision of EGTs a permitted activity. See height and setback restrictions below. Review of the Electricity Authority regulations and cost to connect them to the network so it is fair and not unreasonably high. Create a pathway for local hydrogen generation cooperatives. Using existing farm access tracks and three-phase power poles, the ECGs would backfeed the electricity network, changing the existing power grid from one of supply to one of generation. Generation income, line charges and power line upgrade costs to be overseen by the Electricity Authority. Allow for the creation of private or public cooperatives to manufacture hydrogen fuel from increased electricity generation for use in New Zealand as an export fuel. See potential benefits below. New Zealand Government. The above EGT policy would speed up the transition away from fossil fuels. Farmers and mum and dad investors would begin to champion electricity and or hydrogen fuels as their preferred energy source of their future. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to allow everyday New Zealanders to gain long-term wealth from the ongoing energy generation of New Zealand and the world, reallocating that wealth from oil billionaires and multinationals to everyday New Zealanders. It aligns with New Zealand's clean green image and New Zealand energy transition roadmap. It has the potential to reduce New Zealand's reliance on imported fossil fuels and provide energy security. It has the potential to make New Zealand's domestic and commercial transport and heating carbon zero. Improvements to New Zealand's balance of payments deficit. It has the potential to create an export fuel. It will generate increased GDP and tax revenue. It should have broad bipartisan support from the following sectors: farmers, private investors, institutional investors, environmentally conscious voters. Its intent is multifaceted and the aim is to create freehold tradable titles on existing farm used solely for wind and solar electricity generation. See below on restrictions on other uses. Using farm infrastructure, existing access tracks and power poles, subject to easements for electricity and access and electricity transmission. Create land use permitted activity provisions under the RMA rights for each farm to sell one title and retain one identical piece of infrastructure, wind or solar, that stays on the farm. So you'd have 2 wind turbines on the one track or one power pole. One title would be saleable, the other would stay with the farm. Privately owned wind generation. The first part of the plan is to allow, through the implementation of a national policy statement, to allow 2 times 60 metre high wind turbines as a permitted activity on New Zealand farms, subject to the following draft conditions. The wind turbines must be located at least 200 metres from any road and 2 kilometres from any dwelling. Farmers can use their existing farm races to provide access to the wind turbines and use their existing 3-phase power poles to backfeed the electrical grid. The farmer owner would be entitled to subdivide off 1 wind turbine EGT or sell the section with all the infrastructure provided to install a turbine. This would allow the cost of the turbine's infrastructure to be halved across both assets, and the farmer would be able to sell off the freehold section to the open market. This section would only be able to be used for electricity generation, and be limited to 1,000 square metres, excluding right-of-way for access and or power line easement. This section would have all other activity uses as prohibited and would not be a spot industrial zoning by proxy. So there'd be any other use would be non-complying activities. Solar generation would also be permitted. The EGT titles would be subject to overseas investment approval, and the intent is to create an investment vehicle for New Zealand citizens to become investors in the electricity sector. This creates a competing investment asset for New Zealand investors to enter electricity generation and away from residential investment properties over time. These lots could be mortgaged and sold with turbines or as fully serviced bare land. Farmer emissions reduction. This scenario would encourage farmers to switch to plug-in hybrid, full electric or hydrogen-powered machinery. Once the energy consumption costs are lowered, the farmers would also benefit from the sale of the section, which could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on the annual wind velocity, which would fund a portion of the wind turbine that is retained on the farm and provide another income stream. Low visual impact. The height limit of the wind turbines would be limited to 60 metres, being the same height as high tension power lines that are strewn across the country with no regard for visual amenity. By allowing 2 wind turbines sparsely across a wider area and well set back from the road, the adverse effects would be minimised compared to a large-scale wind farm cluster. District councils would be able to identify and exclude high visual amenity or significant landscapes from inclusion. However, this would be limited to areas where other structures are already excluded. This is an image of a wind turbine next to what is already very unattractive power lines. Income. The private generator could sell their electricity to companies or to local NGOs generating other income sources from the electricity, ideally hydrogen for export. The income derived from electricity generation and line fees would be overseen and set if necessary by the Commerce Commission. Tax. As this is a new type of asset, a fair tax revenue system for the government could be created. New Zealand could receive income tax, GST or other efficient forms of tax to compensate for the drop in fossil fuel revenue. Hydrogen generation. In conjunction with New Zealand Interim Hydrogen Roadmap, the creation of local cooperatives would secure wealth creation for New Zealand investors, not foreign multinationals. The concept of creating an oversupply of electricity is then to create a carbon-free green store of energy for internal and export use. The creation of cooperative or small NGOs that could locally convert electricity to hydrogen would be an add-value cherry on the top. Ideally, this would be generated in old used rail sidings or old underutilised industrial land in the provinces, old dairy factories, etc., near the source of the electricity generation. The hydrogen created could then be trained, trucked or piped to ports for export, with the lowest cost of transport generally prevailing. The generators' smart meters would help notify the hydrogen plant of their output and factory, and then use that amount of electricity to create hydrogen or sell to the power grid. This could happen around the clock, probably excluding peak power times, although this would be left to the free market to determine. NGOs could encourage the title holders or shareholders to install solar panels below the turbines to provide additional capacity during the day. This could also be used by the electricity grid as needed. This would also allow the hydro dams to be used less and get rid of the reliance on coal and gas. The locally created hydrogen could be used for cars and trucks, farm machinery, airplanes, cargo ships, locally and for export. New Zealand could reap the benefits of being an energy exporter instead of an energy importer. Balance of trade deficits. New Zealand currently imports $1.2 billion per quarter of petroleum products, including diesel. Imagine if this cost was not imposed on the New Zealand economy, or even better, if New Zealand investors received the benefits of these funds in compound interest return over generations. Another key benefit is a decrease in imported fossil fuels and a potential increase in export revenue, altering New Zealand's balance of trade. Network connection. New Zealand has 170 electricity substations across the country and a significant network of high-tension power lines. Analysis is needed to confirm the best integration of EGTs onto the network. The government could also use regional development funding or other infrastructure spending to provide connection points along the network for EGTs to connect to. It is envisaged the free market would determine the best location of EGT wind farms based on distance to connection points on the network and wind speeds. This is our lovely electricity grid. Minimal adverse effects. Adverse effects can be mitigated by setbacks for noise and visual appearance. The New Zealand countryside is littered with high-tension power lines. The aim of this proposal is to have twin wind turbines far apart to minimise any true adverse effect. The maximum height for permitted wind turbines would also limit cumulative effects, not too dissimilar to a single high-tension power poles, yet more sparsely separated. The two reports have been used to assess these effects are visual and noise effects reported by residents living close to Manawatu wind farms, preliminary survey results by Dr. Robin Phillips of Massey University, and Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire, cumulative impact of wind turbines on landscape and visual amenity guide, April 2013 by White Consultants UK. Summary of the benefits. The benefits of this system are cumulative, with multiple benefits across the entire economy while building a green economy. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to secure wealth creation for everyday New Zealanders and not transfer the current wealth to oil billionaires or foreign nationals. New Zealand currently imports $1.2 billion per quarter of petroleum products. Imagine if this cost was not imposed on the New Zealand economy, or even better, New Zealand investors receive the benefits of these funds and compound interest returns over generations. New Zealand balance of trade deficit can be turned around, making New Zealand a true export nation again. Mum and dad investors could look to generate passive income over the long-term time horizon and provide an alternative investment option other than residential rental properties. This asset would have all the benefits of private investment property, generate passive income, and provide long-term wealth creation for New Zealand families. Farmers would transfer to green machinery, slashing the mechanical greenhouse gas emissions. New Zealand electricity price would be driven down, lowering the cost of living for everyday New Zealanders and businesses, which is also another current political issue. Farmers would receive a financial boost from the sale of the electrical generation title, which would fund a portion of their own wind turbine and offset the cost of the infrastructure. This proposal requires low government financial input. And that is the end of my presentation. So I said I would send that to you. I will email that to you this evening. All the best.